You guys seem to really appreciate our episode about cars that were dangerous from factory. So today, here's a part 2, where we discuss some of the most sketchy, dangerous, and sometimes downright just illegal cars being sold direct from manufacturer. What's up everybody? Welcome to the channel. This is Car Rant. My name is Nick Lanza. Here we do builds, reviews, and have candid conversations about cars. So if you're interested in any of that, please consider subbing. And let's carry on with our Spooktober series, talking about some of those dangerous, sketchy, haunted, and all that fun stuff when it comes to cars. Imagine you're on a vacation with your family. You've packed your Toyota car full, and you are off to whatever destination you're choosing to go to. Along the way, you're having a grand old time when suddenly the car starts accelerating on you. You're already doing 55 miles an hour, which is about the average highway speed limit in America, and you're now rapidly accelerating up to 60, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, and you're not able to get the car to stop. Well, stories like these were very commonplace during the early thousands, as Toyota and by proxy Lexus had to pull in a recall on thousands of their cars for this exact problem. Initially, Toyota tried to blame this acceleration on floor mats, citing that the all-weather floor mats were tougher, more durable, and would slide up and block the pedal in place. And I actually personally remember seeing that video on television where they tried to say that this is what was happening. But the problem was even in those videos, it wasn't accelerating. In fact, the actual problem with many Toyota models, from Camrys to Corollas and everything in between, was that the gas pedals were being stuck down, unable to return to their resting idle position. If you've ever owned a gas-powered car that had a clutch and a manual transmission, then you would know this sensation very similar to that of a clutch pedal with air in the line. And that is what was happening to the Accelerator. This ultimately forced Toyota to recall 9 million cars, because that's how many cars had these faulty pedals, and they had to completely redesign it from the ground up, costing the company billions. While there is no exact body count for the amount of people harmed or killed because of this acceleration, some people begin to wonder if maybe some of those car accidents involving Toyotas wasn't actually the driver's fault. Last episode, Ford got bagged pretty hard for some really shady stuff that they did with the Ford Explorer, and of course their all-time most infamous Ford Pinto. However, today on this episode, I'm only going to bag on them one last time, and that is for their part-to-reverse transmission failure. Picture the setting. You've just come home from the grocery store, from church, from wherever, with your family and your spouse, and you put the car in park, expecting it to stay where you've placed it. Except that it didn't, because suddenly the car is now rolling backwards because it went into reverse. Ford got into seriously hot water with the federal government for this one, as the body count was much higher than anticipated. According to some reports, the NHTSA, or National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, received more than 23,000 complaints, 6,000 accident reports, and 1,700 injuries, with 98 injuries confirmed to be the direct result of the defect. In total, while Toyota's 9 million cars seems ridiculous, Ford had to recall 21 million plus models in order to rectify this transmission failure. Really makes you wonder if all those car enthusiasts shouting "Save the manuals" was really onto something. Now, this next one on my list didn't have necessarily a recall or some kind of federal outcry. This car actually had a cult following, and in fact many people today still find it to be highly desirable. The DeLorean DMC-12 is in fact actually a pretty unsafe car. For starters, low visibility meant that you have a hard time seeing around, as well, the rear engine thing, Americans just didn't quite design it right up until, well, recently with the latest Corvette. But even if they had, It had a paltry motor that couldn't get out of its own way and was notoriously bad for falling apart because, well, the rest of the budget for this car was pretty much spent on, well, drugs. John DeLorean was a notorious cocaine addict. Yet despite all these things, the thing that made the car truly unsafe was if you ever rolled the car over. Other vehicles that have going door configurations have ways of getting out of the vehicle still. Yet for some reason, the DeLorean doesn't have that. So on the off chance that things do go wrong and you do roll over, you're stuck. And of course, with fire safety at the time being a very questionable thing at best, that meant that you are more than likely now stuck in a sardine can waiting to explode, especially considering you're told to wash the car with gasoline because of the stainless finish. All this put together means that the DeLorean, albeit Hollywood famous, is also a Hollywood horror case. Next up on the list, a literal death trap, the BMW Isetta. The Isetta was one of the world's first microcars, a beautiful Italian design that was able to be adapted into a couple of different styles and models, but one of the first cars ever to hit somewhere around 95 miles per gallon. Bear in mind, this is being achieved in the 1950s, something that even today's vehicles still struggle to try and get to. Now, this fuel economy is largely due to the fact that the car weighs very, very little and is an extremely small vehicle. It's basically a motorcycle with a dome over it. That brought along its own safety hazards. Namely, due to the fact that it was made out of a lightweight metal, it also couldn't take a hit and thus was basically a sardine can waiting to be struck. It also had one other big flaw, and that was it had one door. And God forbid you get into a head-on collision, that door would trap you inside. In other words, this thing is like the opposite of a Ford Pinto. If you get hit in the back of a Ford Pinto, you're probably going to die. If you get hit in the front of a BMW Isetta, well, you're probably going to die. The sad irony is that even though this thing had some great technology in it for fuel economy, it just could not pass even the safety standards of its own time, and thus did not sell all that well, around 130,000 units in total, and it didn't last long in the States either. Frankly, it's not a wonder, as small cars in the 50s were not really well looked upon by Americans, preferring their much bigger, muscular cars like the Chevy Corvette. During the Cold War, Russia had, well, basically cut itself off from the rest of the world and had to borrow many aspects of automotive design from the other companies and countries around it. Russia had pretty much made enemies out of everybody, and very few people wanted to trade with Russia. Whether it was because they were copying weapons or threatening other nations, you pick your poison. Russia had probably beef with somebody somewhere along the line in that place. So when it came time to give cars to its constituents, they didn't have many options. Thus, companies like Lada and Yugo were born, and they borrowed parts heavily from different companies. I can name specifically Fiat being one of those primary companies that they stole from. Yet out of their long list of lemon cars, the Yugo GV was notorious for basically being a time bomb. The vehicles themselves as a whole would only last at most 50,000 miles. Not the engine, the whole car. They were notorious for literally rattling apart and panels falling off every which way at different intervals in its lifespan. This meant that a Yugo with somewhere around 42,000 miles is considered a well-used car. Unless you're a Subaru, then that means you're probably on engine number 2. But of course, if the car falling apart around you wasn't bad enough, let's add in the fact that if you got into a front-end collision, the whole front end of the car would impale you into the seat. The crumple zone was the car. It didn't have like a section where there's super dense, thick material around the firewall or anything like that. No, the entire car would just start to collapse in on you, the driver, and whoever was in your front seat. And there you have it, folks. 5 more examples of cars and vehicles and parts that should never have ever seen the road. If you didn't catch our part 1, stay tuned for the very end. I'll have a nice little card for you to click on so you can go see that next. But Are there any other vehicles you think should be on this list? Let us know down in the comments section. I love to learn about cars and history and car culture. So if there's other vehicles that should be on this list, let me know. I know there's some brands that didn't get any attention at all, such as Mopar and anything Mercedes. So if there's something in those categories that we should be aware of, we want to know about it. But with that said, I hope you guys have been enjoying this Spooktober, and we'll see you guys on the next episode. God bless you all, and peace.